and welcome to Cleaning Up History, where my goal is preserving headstones in cemeteries and telling forgotten stories of the past. Warning, this video may contain adult content, violence, as well as some of the newspaper articles may contain some racial terminology, so viewer discretion is advised. The story that I'm going to be telling today takes place in the late 1800s. In our general area, and I came across the story quite some time back and had saved some newspaper articles from this story, but recently I'd gotten a request to do a story on this. I guess someone had heard about it that grew up in the area and wanted some more details about it. So I did some additional research and found this crazy story about a potentially serial killers in the area. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start this story. Now, keep in mind that I'm basing this story off of newspaper articles, and they were very much like tabloids back then. They would just have headlines to get people's attention to sell papers. So facts were not always 100% correct, and names, dates, actual events were not always correct. So I'm going to start this story by talking about the death of a young girl named by the last name of Bryant. Now these articles, they call her Melda Bryant, they call her Eliza, they call her several different first names, and they also have different ages for the girl. One article states that she was 18 years old, one says she was 19, one says she was 22. Now the research that I've done, I believe I've pinpointed out who this Bryant girl was. Her name was actually Melda, and she went by the name Melda, and some of the articles called her Melda as well. And if this is in fact the correct girl, her age was she was actually in her later 20s when this happened. But regardless, the Bryant girl was walking in the Kinsey area, which is just across the Jellico, the Tennessee-Kentucky state line. And I think she's actually buried in Whitley County. I think this is actually part of Whitley County, Kentucky. But she was walking to, I guess, her aunt's house to do some work. And she passed by her neighbor's cabin, which was a lady who had a fire built, and she was doing her laundry. And because she had a fire built, there was a gentleman who had stopped and asked if it was okay if he lit his pipe on her fire. And she agreed. And at the point where this interaction was taking place, the Bryant girl walked by the property. And after she passed, this gentleman started asking the lady questions about this girl. And she didn't think a whole lot of it. And she just went on about her business. Well, there happened to be some train tracks that ran through the area. And there was a man on a train who, I guess, part of his job involved getting off the train and checking the tracks. And as he was doing so, he came across the Bryant girl's body. It was still warm. There was still blood coming out of her. But nonetheless, she was dead. And it says that this was a brutal murder. Her head was crushed in. The details of these articles are horrible. And it appeared that she had been assaulted sexually as well. In the 1800s, people would take the law into their own hands, especially when it came to something like this. Everyone was outraged at what had happened to this girl. Obviously, I mean, who wouldn't be? And So very quickly a mob formed, and they found a man in Jellico who had matched the description of the remember the lady next door who was doing her laundry, and the man had stopped and was asking questions about her. He matched the description that she gave about this man, and there was also a pipe found beside the Bryant girl's body, which matched the pipe that the gentleman had lit earlier. And this man they found in Jellico had blood on his clothing. So, obviously, everyone assumed that this was the killer. And this man's name was Leonard Ty. And I guess he went by the name Lynn. That's what most of the newspaper articles call him, but that could have been incorrect also. But I don't know how, but at some point 2 other men were implicated in this murder, and their name was Joe Payne, who apparently had several aliases, and I'll talk about him more in a minute, and a man named John Paxton. So this mob of people got these men and took them to the place where they found the Bryant girl dead, and they hung them by their necks. And they hung them just to the point that they became lifeless, and then they cut them down in hopes they were basically torturing these men, trying to get a confession out of them so that they could hang them to death. But when they cut these men down, they were crying and pleading for their life and still maintained that they were innocent. So the mob was afraid that they may have the wrong men, so they returned the men to the jail. And a couple of months after this event, there was a girl by the name of Nanny Belle Cecil. She was from Huntsville, Tennessee. Some of these articles say she was from Huntsville, Alabama, but I have in fact researched her, and she was from Scott County, Tennessee. Nanny and her aunt was visiting family in the Quincy area, and they got lost. They got off of a train, and they got lost and couldn't find the home of the family members that they were going to visit. And so they stopped at the home of Mr. Leonard. No, actually it wasn't Leonard Ty. It was Joe Payne, the home of Joe Payne, asking for directions to these particular family members' house. And Payne agreed to show them to this house. So he leaves with the girls and he leads them out to a very rural area, at which point he begins to sexually assault Nanny Belle. And when the 2 women started screaming and yelling and begging for help, he says to them that just a couple of months ago they killed a girl who wouldn't shut up, and they needed to just shut up and let him do what he wanted to do. So after he finished with the girl, he left them there to fend for themselves, and they eventually found their way out and reported what had happened. And they brought Payne to be identified, and he was positively identified. Payne was taken to Pine Mountain by a mob of people and was hung until he was dead. This happened at 8 p.m. and the mob told everyone, don't touch his body. No one is to touch this body. So he hung there all night, and at 10 o'clock the next morning, they brought Nanny Belle to his body and gave her a knife to cut his dead body down. One of the law enforcement officers who showed up that day examined the body of Mr. Payne and stated, this man's name is not Joe Payne. This man's name is Kincaid, and he was part of the people who were liberated by the miners in Coal Creek. So that's a whole story on itself, but some prisoners were liberated by miners in the Coal Creek area. And a couple of months later, I found some articles about Nanny Bell. That happened in, I can't remember what month. It was February, I think, of 1893. In June of 1893, Nanny Bell tried to commit suicide with a shotgun. It was not successful, and she survived and went on to have a family, but this incident scarred her severely mentally. At the time that they were hanging Payne, he confessed to the crime against Nanny Bell, and he also talked about the Bryant murder and confessed that he was a part of that, along with the two other men who were originally suspected, Leonard Ty and John Paxton. So mobs tried for quite some time to get Payne and Paxton. And they ended up moving Payne around to different jails in order to keep the mob from getting a hold of him. And the neighbor who had been there when Payne lit his pipe, when they brought Payne for her to identify him, she could not positively identify him. She said she couldn't say for certain that was the same man. And because of this, in 1893, Payne was acquitted of this crime. The story doesn't end here, though. No, it gets much worse than that. So some time goes on, and then in March of 1894, in Harlan, Kentucky, there was some hunters in the woods on a hunting trip, and they discovered a young girl tied up at a cliff, hanging underneath a cliff. And when they got to her, she was alive. She had, I guess, this is in March in Harlan, Kentucky, so it was obviously cold. There was a fire barely smoldering at the girl's feet. And when the hunters talked to this girl, she had explained to them that she had been abducted, basically, and tied up there. And a man named Leonard Ty would leave her there all day and then come back at nighttime and have his way with her and give her a drink of water and barely enough food just to keep her alive. These hunters were outraged at this story, so they decided that instead of going to the authorities, they were just going to wait there for Ty to return to this girl. And he did. He returned to this girl to have his way with her. And according to the newspaper articles, these hunters, they got Ty, and he confessed, and he also confessed to killing the Bryant girl. And he had told them that he had done this several other times, abducted a girl and kept her tied away in the woods. And he would come and have his way with her, and he would keep them until they ultimately passed away. And that he had done 2 girls in Tennessee this way, as well as a girl in Kentucky. And that he had made a mistake with this girl, and he didn't put her far enough back in the woods, and that's why he was caught. So these men were furious, and they were there with this poor girl. Her name was Laura Coleman, and she was the daughter of a farmer in Harlan, Kentucky. And so they, according to the newspaper articles, took the skin off of Ty while he was alive, and at that point built a fire and roasted him alive. I don't know what happened to the man named John Paxton, who was actually, he was a white man, and he was said to be involved with all these incidences here in the Jellico area as well. I don't know what happened to him. I can't find any articles that say if he was caught or punished in any way. I'm not sure. But I know Payne, or Kincaid, whatever his name may have been, he was hung on High Mountain. And then Leonard High, he was taken care of by the hunters in Harlan County. It said that after Payne was hung, the whole community was so outraged by what he'd done to Nanny Cecil that they could not find a burial place for him. That he wasn't allowed to be buried in any of the white cemeteries, so he was turned over to the black cemetery, which also refused to allow him to be buried there. So there was a man by the name of Perkins who agreed that he could be buried on his property and that he would provide a burial place for any such individuals in the future. I'm not sure where this land is or this burial place. If any of you guys know, please let me know. I think it would be kind of an interesting place to visit. I think it said his name was J.C. Perkins. But that's the story I have on the potential serial killer in the area I guess starting in 1892, maybe sometime before that. And the headstone, the burial place for the Bryant girl that I found, I believe this is her. The day of death is not correct on the headstone, but any of you guys doing research know that those are oftentimes wrong as well. It's really hard to do research during this time frame because people didn't care about accuracy of information. So, even though it was near the 1st of February when the Bryant girl died, this particular headstone has, I'm sorry, it was December. I think it was December 5th when she died, but the headstone has December 12th. But I do believe it's the same girl, because I did find an article that stated that the Bryant girl was the daughter of Frank Bryant. And this are Melda Bryant. Her father's name was Francis Frank Bryant, and her mother's name was Melinda. And some articles had called her Melinda as well. So, I believe that this is the same girl. And that's the horrible story that I have for you guys today. I will probably do a story later on the Coal Creek incident that I mentioned briefly in this story. But, yeah, that's the story that I have on the murder of the Bryant girl in near Jellico Creek, or Jellico Station. And don't forget, if you like the content of my channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. And if you hit the little bell button, you'll be notified anytime I upload any new videos. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.